We have lots to discuss in today's video, including the drama in Vancouver. President of the team, Jim Rutherford, conducted an interview with the Globe and Mail and has confirmed a lot of the past rumors and really outlines what the future just might be like, kind of tampering expectations on some trade returns as well. So could we see Pettersson as well as Miller both dealt? We also think there's a good chance that Brock Boeser could be traded by the deadline. We'll discuss all the drama, all the quotes from this interview regarding Jim Rutherford and the Canucks. Plus, we have the quarter-century teams announced for the Tampa Bay Lightning as well as the San Jose Sharks. We have big news from the NHL waiver wire, including a veteran from St. Louis available on waivers, and bad news in Minnesota. The Thrill Kaprizov is going to be out for an extended time due to surgery. A lot more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss today. First up, let's start with news from the NHL waiver wire. There was a dedicated video on the channel earlier, but in case you missed it, the St. Louis Blues today placed veteran forward Brandon Saad on waivers. Saad is signed for this year and one more with a cap hit of $4.5 million. He's certainly not having great, productive year right now. I believe he has 7 goals in the season, but he's only scored, I believe, in 3 or 4 games. Like, he's scored multiple times. I think 3 times he scored 2 goals in the game. And really overall, 4 games out of 40 where he scored a goal for what he's expected to do is not really living up to expectations. We've heard and we've reported here on the channel in the last probably 5-6 weeks or so on multiple occasions that the Blues were trying heavily to trade him and find him a fresh start, and they had not been successful. So they kind of got to a point where they want to open up the roster spot and let a player like Alex Texier get more opportunity. And so Saad has to go on waivers. And if he does clear, he will go down to the minors. So Saad, of course, could still be traded after the waivers period is over if he's not picked up. Sometimes having a player like this clear waivers might entice a team to know that if they pick him up by trade, he's already cleared and they could put him down to the minors without having to go through this process again. So we'll have to wait and see how things go. We'll find out tomorrow afternoon. There's certainly a few teams out there that could use some help with some scoring. And, maybe he just needs a fresh start. I mean, he's 32 years old. Like I said, under contract for this year and next, which that extra year might be a deterrent for some teams. So we'll have to wait and see where that goes. We also have Cole Reinhardt of the Ottawa Senators on waivers today as well. The 24-year-old needs waivers to head back down to the minor leagues. He's played 12 games for the Senators after being recalled due to some bottom 6 injuries. Filled in nicely, put up 1 goal, 1 assist. But they have enough healthy bodies, and they need to make room for Linus Ullmark, who's on long-term injured reserve right now, but ready to return. And they're going to be doing some cap gymnastics this week before they play their next game on Thursday. There's also news from the other side of the waivers. That's unconditional waivers, which is for contract termination. Both these players and their teams have mutually agreed to terminate their contracts if they clear waivers. And that is Milos Kellerman of the Utah and Marcus Silvergard of the St. Louis Blues. Yesterday, Nicholas Aube-Kubel of the Buffalo Sabres was on waivers, and he's cleared and has been sent down to their AHL affiliate. A quick roster move in Nashville. They've recalled Kevin Gravel, and they've sent Kiefer Bellows back to the AHL. Big news out of Minnesota today. Bill Guerin took to talk to the media with some bad news on Kirill Kaprizov. Of course, we know he missed a while due to injury with a lower body injury. He came back. He's played, I think, 3 games now, and it's just not working out. That he's going to have to succumb and take some more time off and have the surgery to fix whatever this issue is. So he's going to be missing at least 4 weeks. It's going to be a week-to-week situation with a 4-week minimum. So, it could drag on to 5-6 weeks. It's kind of hard to say. They don't feel like this is season ending or anything like that. If you look at the calendar, we're not too far from the end of January. So it's going to probably be end of February, early March sometime when he can return. So there should still be, at least 2, 3, 4 weeks left in the season when, depending on how quickly he can get back. But obviously that's a lot of games. The Minnesota Wild are, they're fairly secure in a playoff spot, but, they've been having a little bit of a tough skid as of late. And if that skid kind of carries on too far, even if their playoff spot isn't in super big time jeopardy, their placement and where they are could be. You just never know. So certainly something to keep in mind. It's a bad break for them, with Kaprizov definitely being their most talented offensive player. So as I mentioned as well, we got some quarter-century teams announced. One came out late last night for the Sharks, and we got the Lightning here today. So the San Jose quarter-century teams are as follows. Team 1, no big surprise. We've got Patrick Marleau, Jumbo Joe Thornton, and Joe Pavelski as your forward trio. Brent Burns and Marc-Edouard Vlasic on the back end, and Nabokov between the pipes. Team number 2 as the forward trio of Logan Couture, Tomas Hertl, and Owen Nolan. On the back end, you got Dan Boyle and Erik Karlsson, with Martin Jones between the pipes. So some pretty good rosters. Obviously, the Sharks were a long-time playoff contender and certainly had some good deep playoff runs and came close to winning the Cup on multiple occasions. So lots of great talent there throughout the early part of the century. In Tampa, again, some pretty deep rosters here as well. Team number 1, Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov, and Marty St. Louis make up your forward trio, with Victor Hedman and Dan Boyle on the back end. So, of course, Boyle makes it on both teams. And, of course, Vasilevsky between the pipes. Team number 2, we have a forward trio of Vincent Lecavalier, Brad Richards, and Braden Point. Ryan McDonough, Pavel Kabina on the back end, with Ben Bishop being the steady goaltender between the pipes. Now, I'm not certain, but I believe I saw on X right before starting to record here that I think Vasilevsky might not play tonight, and that the Lightning might be needing an emergency backup goaltender in their game against, I believe they're playing Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. So another situation to watch there. I don't know what is going on with Vasilevsky and if it's anything serious or what have you. So situation worth monitoring. Now, as I mentioned, the Canucks, the drama in Vancouver continues. We got our article today from the Globe and Mail, which has a long interview with Jim Rutherford and some very interesting quotes. I mean, we've heard numerous times from JT Miller and Elias Pettersson about their so-called differences or beef feud, whatever you want to call it. And they both said publicly numerous times that there's nothing to it, the media is making it up, denied everything on multiple occasions. Well, we've heard it from enough other sources, and now this time from the president confirming everything. So here's an interesting quote from Jim Rutherford in this interview. He says, "I feel like for a long time that there was a solution here because everybody has worked on it, including the parties involved. But it only gets resolved for a short period of time, and then it festers again. And so it certainly appears like there is not a good solution here that would keep this group together." So basically, Miller and Pettersson have been at each other's throats and have not liked each other and have had this beef, whatever it is, for a long period of time. They've worked on it. They've had multiple people help with the situation. Bruce Boudreau has commented on it. Former player Brad Richardson's commented on it. And, they've known this for a long time. This is no secret. It's been a long time, multiple years in the making. So even when Pettersson was at his peak, 100-point Pettersson, this was going on. And, we've seen the highs with this group. We've seen Miller and Pettersson both perform phenomenally while this has been going on. We've seen them both perform poorly, like really poorly, and somewhere in between. So, we really don't know here. But based on what Jim Rutherford is saying, he doesn't see a way for them to keep both players. And I guess the problem you got to remember here too is if that locker room is divided, this is, I think, why there's decent odds that we see both traded, is that over time you might have two sides of this in the locker room. You might have Miller advocates and PD advocates. And if you trade one of those guys, what's going to happen to those guys that felt that the other guy that stayed is in the wrong? It could still divide the locker room. It could still have issues. That's why I think there really is a chance we could see both guys moved. The thing that gets me is you knew that this was going on for a long time. And what happened? Remember, it seemed like they were in a position where they had to pick between Miller and Horvat. They traded Horvat. They kept Miller. Everybody thought after a while, oh, look at this. Miller's been so good. They made the right choice. but not if all the other drama is largely his doing. You traded your captain. You completely changed your culture in a sense because, Horvat was a long-time captain there. And, did you really pick the right guy? Why did you sign both of these players? And why did the players want to sign long-term? Knowing that the other was there and going to be signed long-term and going to have to deal with each other if you can't make it work, if it's that bad. It's really kind of mind-boggling. So to me, I think a lot of this is on management as much as it is on these two players. Another quote here as well from this article from Jim Rutherford says that we've had these conversations to put the differences aside, and I think the parties understand that, and I think they've tried. As you know, sometimes emotions get deep, and as much as people try, sometimes you just can't get over it. It certainly appears that's what's going on here anyways. So, listening to Rutherford, they've tried to make it work. They can never come to a longer term thing. They can't get over hurt feelings. There's no way around this, is what he's saying. And then some of the other things he mentioned as well, there was, this is not a direct quote, this is just kind of summarizing, but essentially kind of trying to tamper the expectations on a trade, talking about how they're tough trades to win, and if they trade at Miller, you're trading a 1C, you're probably going to get back something less, maybe a 2 or a 3C, and maybe those pieces have to come back and then maybe be packaged up for something else later on, and trying to kind of lower the expectations that a JT Miller trade might not really be a trade they can win. It might be a trade that they kind of don't have a lot of leverage on, and might be a trade that on the, outside looks like it was a poor return, but they can hopefully get some assets to work with and maybe turn those into something better. A Pettersson trade, different story. I think you have a little bit less leverage with Miller. So I think with Pettersson, he doesn't have the trade protection either. So you have more teams you can talk to. I think if Miller's going to be traded, it's going to be the Rangers. Now, the team that seems to be the front runner for Pettersson, if he is going to be moved, would be the Buffalo Sabres. I know for sure because we've seen Pettersson comment on it before. He's great friends with Rasmus Dahlin. I think if he was going to be traded, that might be a spot where he might welcome a trade to. They have some pieces there that would be interesting for Vancouver. Some people don't think a return of like Cousins and Byram is good enough. We know Buffalo from the recent reports are willing to consider an Owen Power in a deal. So, I'm not sure what exactly a package there looks like, but it'd be something along those lines. I know we've heard the discourse about the Ottawa Senators maybe being in the mix for Pettersson. I honestly don't really think that makes a lot of sense for them. From a cap perspective, it doesn't make sense. The rumor was Josh Norris being available. I'm like, Pettersson makes over almost $3.5 million more than Norris, and I don't think he's $3.5 million better, at least based on how he's played recently. Now, if he was consistently that 100-point player we've seen a couple of years ago, okay, maybe that's a possibility, but looking at their cap structure and how much more he makes than everybody else, it would be really, really tough for them to do. And I don't know that it really, based on what we've seen lately, really is it worth it? There's a lot of risk, I think, from Ottawa's part to make that kind of trade. So I honestly think a team like Buffalo was better positioned to make that deal. So we'll see what happens. But both of those guys very much could be traded. And like these quotes from Rutherford, there's no denying this. I wonder if it's going to put each of these players in an awkward spot because they've both denied this, to the media numerous times. The last time Miller was asked about it, he asked the media, do you want me to go back and get Petey to come out? We can do this together. Like, what more is it going to take for them just to come out and admit that, yeah, we don't like each other, we're trying to work through it, whatever. Like, I know it's awkward for them to say, it's awkward for them to admit, but it sure sounds like, based on Rutherford saying, that it's having a major impact on the rest of the team. And, it's something has to be done here sooner than later. He also talks about the fact of they have to keep Quinn Hughes in mind. If they were going to do a rebuild, that it would make more sense to trade Quinn Hughes, but they don't want that. They said that they'd like to be able to figure out being able to keep Quinn Hughes for his whole career. So obviously, if they feel like they need to trade one or both of these guys, it's going to have to be a rebuild. Now, there's also, I said, lots of belief that there really hasn't been any meaningful conversations with Brock Besser's camp on a new contract, and barring something drastically changing here, the Canucks go on a crazy run or something like that, the expectation is that Boeser would likely be traded before the deadline. I don't know that we're going to see the Canucks get into the playoffs. Obviously, their play over the next few weeks trying to get into that playoff spot might play a role in the team's decision and how they proceed here, but certainly going to be very interesting nonetheless. It's possible we could see Pettersson, Miller, and or Boeser possibly all gone, and if it doesn't all happen, maybe in the summer. This team seems like it's going to go through drastic and dramatic change. If the Canucks and Rutherford does not see any meaningful solution in-house and that both players are likely to be dealt, that's terrible. Like I said before, I think that's as much on management as anybody else. They signed these players both to a long-term deal, knowing all this history and knowing all this well before they signed those contracts. And really, they haven't really done much, at least it seems like, to really fix it either. So, I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me how they can't get over this. They're making tons of money. I know there's different personalities and whatnot, but I'm sure you go into every other locker room, there's bound to be a couple of guys that aren't great friends that just they see things differently, and you got to be able to work past that. It's just, but at the same time, Miller has got a reputation. He has moved around a bit, and the belief is that it's kind of, he can be wearing his welcome out, so to speak, over time. So let me know what you think of this latest article, the comments from Jim Rutherford. Are we going to see significant blockbuster deals out of Vancouver? Are they going to trade both Pettersson and Miller, and probably Boeser too? What is this team going to look like when we get to March's NHL trade deadline? Let me know down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.